not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Ho, 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 everyone. And welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. I hope you are all prepared to have an amazing Christmas. I'm a fan of Christmas. I've had moments when, it's not maybe things aren't going great, right? Christmas is cheery. It's an opportunity to try to put on that happy face. Try to be the kind of person you want to be at Christmas time. It's also a great time to connect with family if that's not something you do on a regular basis, right? We usually all travel a bit. Even when you've got sort of complicated family setups, it's always nice to take time to spend with family. And as always, as we approach the end of the year, it's an opportunity to reflect, try to figure out the best version of ourselves, the things that we want to do, the things we want to do in our lives to feed success in the coming year. Of course, that story is different for everyone, as we've discussed on previous shows. But today, I wanted to talk a little bit about multifamily. I came across an interesting article, makes some interesting points. I think multifamily is absolutely a great way to go. I'm kind of a fan of duplexes. I won't go higher than quads right now for me personally. It's also a great place to start with house hacking. At least that's what a lot of folks refer to it, where you buy a multifamily unit and you live in one of the units. And as long as it's 4 or less units, you will get the preferred lending that's available for homeowners because it's your home, right? Once you go to 5 units, that won't apply anymore. You'll never get that great lower rate by buying a 5 unit, whether you live in it or not, doesn't matter. So I thought we would jump in and do that. I always kind of have another little tidbit nagging at the back of my brain when I start a show, and I try to keep my shows now focused on one point, but because I get distracted by the shiny thing, I tend to stray. So I want to do my straying right now. I want to keep my straying contained, and I want to just share a quickie. We'll call this a Rebel Broker quickie. It doesn't sound quite. It sounded better in my head. In terms of tips, like particularly in my marketplace, where homes are going for $1 million plus on average. How do you find the better deals? Because if you go and you search at homes that are for sale in Santa Clara County, for instance, you're going to find an awful lot that are, being on offer for the high 800s and they end up selling for 900 and something. So how do you find these other ones, the examples of properties where people get a decent deal? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions here, and one of them is statistical and very easy to do. So days on market, find homes that are currently listed, that have been on the market for at least 90 days, and see if you can, and see what's up, right? They would have to match your requirements. So whatever your configuration is, I always tend to look for 3 beds, 2 baths. Look for homes that have been on the market for 90 days or more. And I'm looking at a list right now of homes that were on the market for 196 days, 168 days, 124 days, 109 days. Now, 2 of these homes are actives and 2 of them are pendings. But that just goes to show you that even in a Santa Clara County market, these things are happening. Now, one of them is in a neighborhood called East Palo Alto. For those of you who are local, you know that East Palo Alto has a bad vibe or a bad rep, and it did, right? When I first started in this marketplace, East Palo Alto was a demilitarized zone. Since then, huge chunks of East Palo Alto have gotten bought up and developed, and multis have been built, huge malls, IKEA, all kinds of stuff has been built around there. So it's not that place anymore. In fact, I'm going to challenge anyone who doesn't believe what I'm saying to go up to Trulia right now, zoom in over on Palo Alto and East Palo Alto, and the way the dividing line between Palo Alto and East Palo Alto is the 101 freeway. Click on the map and then click on the crime little doodad to see what the crime rate is. And lo and behold, what you will find is that the crime rate in East Palo Alto is now lower than the crime rate in Palo Alto, right? So you cross that freeway and you expect crap to be bad, and it is not. You see a disconnect and then when you check what the average price is in East Palo Alto versus Palo Alto. Now, this is a couple of years ago, but I used to be in that market, so I still occasionally get referrals from clients who love me in Palo Alto. And we got one 2 years ago, for a crappy little house that ended up selling for $2.5 million. You can get that same house in East Palo Alto, $800,000. That trend cannot last. So I think East Palo Alto, if this is a market you want to play in, great. There's lots of other reasons to not play in the California market, and we're actually going to talk about that a little bit. But that's the statistical way. Pull up some of these things. You can also pull up expireds or canceleds that never sold within the last, say, 6 months, and you can approach those folks directly and say, I'm not interested in listing your house, or have your agent on your behalf say, I'm not interested in listing your house. I'm interested in buying it. Come to some other arrangement outside of the transaction on how your agent would get compensated. Because if you start talking about needing it to get listed and giving your agent a percentage and all this other stuff, that's gonna annoy them, and it's probably gonna scare them off. So you need to come up with some other way to pay your agent. You're doing all the legwork. If your agent is just providing you with a list, you might even be able to negotiate a flat fee. Like, hey, I'll pay you $1,000 for this, or $500, whatever it is, right? But again, that's one reason why it's good to establish a relationship with a real estate agent. Now, here's the other thing, and this is really where this started. I was looking at listings for homes for investment purposes, and I found one, and it was another one of those instances where I look at a listing and I feel so ridiculously sorry for the sellers. Here is, and the primary reason is because of the way the listing is set up. The photos are crappy. Not all the data is in the listing. Not even the private notes that would go to other agents. Not even the public notes are what I would consider adequate for a listing. It's been on the market for 200 plus days, and the comments in there are talking about, make sure to show up for the open house on such and such a date, which was 7 months ago. Right? So this agent has completely abandoned this listing. There's a sign in front of the property. There's a listing in the MLS, and they're not even tweaking things as time goes on to try to develop some sort of buzz about this property. Did a Google search on this property and this agent. Can't find anything outside of the MLS that this person is doing to try and market this property. They could be doing tons of direct mail stuff. Who knows? Maybe that's happening, but I doubt it. You can tell the apathy of an agent when you read these listings. If your agent can't figure it out, ask the agent to show you the full listing. And it depends on the MLS, I'm guessing. But I know in my MLS, I'm not supposed to show the confidential comments to clients, and I don't. But I will give a critique of that information to my buyers. Because you as a buyer, there's nothing more awesome than an apathetic agent on the other side. Other good data is what's the performance of this agent. Have your agent pull up a list of all the homes where this agent has been listed as the buyer's agent or seller's agent in the last year, and see if they're hungry. Because as I've mentioned in past shows, one of the things I like to try to do is to get the agent representing the other side to be an advocate for my offer. And there's a difference in terms of results when you do that kind of stuff, and it doesn't take that much to do. It's a small amount of extra effort on the part of your agent, but it involves one-to-one. And this is the thing. This is what drives me crazy. Agents don't like to call other agents. They want everything to just be in the MLS. They want to be able to go look at the property without calling anyone. And that's why homes that are vacant and have a lockbox tend to get the most attention. You look at the stats. Now, I've had both kinds of listings. And I'll usually counsel my sellers that the more easy it is for folks to access the property, the higher the probability this thing's going to sell fast and for a higher amount of money, because more eyeballs equals typically multiple offers. So I've had both, and usually I will really go crazy with the marketing when my seller insists on it being like appointment only, and that kind of stuff where you got to have 24 to 48 hours notice. And I, over time, I'll try to whittle that down to something that's easier. But in any event, I have seen the difference. And the only way to explain these things is agent apathy. And I hate to say it, but if you assume the worst characteristics of on the part of real estate agents and account for them in what you're doing, you're typically going to be more successful if your plan assumes that. I hate to say that. And you know what? I'm sure it's not just an agent thing. I'm sure it's a human nature thing. But you, as a buyer, can absolutely, and what's really bizarre is you'll also find agents that will oftentimes act as a surrogate for their seller. In other words, they'll turn down your offer before they'll even show it to their seller. In a lot of cases, why that is because A, this agent has already made enough money this year, or so far, or whatever time frame they use to measure. They're doing all right. They're not hungry for a deal to close. And they want a certain amount, and this is assuming the worst, right? It could be completely altruistic. It could be they are just fighting for their seller's price. And I agree with that sentiment. I think you should fight for your seller's price, but you should also make your seller aware of every offer that comes through. And I know for a fact in a few past cases that the sellers never got my offers from different clients. Why? Because I ended up meeting those folks after the fact and discovering they never saw our offers. So I've come up with strategies to deal with that. In any event, these are all things you're going to want to know as a buyer to see how ripe things are. And the other thing I'm going to suggest is, in addition to using these techniques to try and find ripe properties for you to make offers on, be willing to make lots and lots of offers. You know, that's something that I find very bizarre. I have to have a conversation with a lot of buyers saying, listen, don't be afraid of, particularly my first-time investors, right? We'll do the math, and sometimes a property will kind of pencil out, but the bottom line is, for the return they're getting, it's and the money that they'll have wrapped up in it, it doesn't make sense. And it also, which is one reason why multifamily is so sexy in California, you cannot make the argument to me unless you assume a whole lot more top end in terms of appreciation, which I don't think we're in those days right now. I have investors who are willing to buy with negative cash flow based on the idea that the property is going to appreciate at such a rate that that's what's going to compensate them for the lack of cash flow. And I don't think that's a smart way to go. I say you buy in a sub market within some of these California markets where you can do this stuff and be positive cash flow. Unless you've got some sort of crazy insight that no one else has. I wouldn't do that kind of stuff. But anyway, so that just to kickstart that stuff, and you can start these conversations. These techniques would work anywhere. In terms of you identifying properties where you have the best opportunity to get the best price. All right, so let's go ahead and get to the meat of today's show. Basically we're going to talk about the best multifamily investment markets for 2020. Now we're going to hit those in just a moment, but we're going to take a quick break, so don't go away. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. Look at that. I actually put an ad in the middle of the show. Of course, it's my stupid ancient ad. I need to come up with something new and sexy, but anyway. I don't know. Yeah, it's always about the shiny thing. So I updated upgraded my photo game. As a lot of you know, there's a lot of things to real estate I like doing. I'm a little bit of a control freak, and I often find that when I pay someone it depends on the job, $200 to $500 to do photos for a property, I'm like, God, I really wish they'd gotten this angle, or I really feel like this isn't exposed quite right. And maybe that's because I took a lot of photography classes in college, photojournalism and stuff, but this is back in the day when it was film, right? You actually had to use chemicals to develop the negatives, then you had to enlarge them, and then use chemicals to develop the prints. The wide world of digital photography today is awesome. So I just bought myself a new camera, a Sony A6600. Got myself a couple of sexy prime lenses, with a wide angle on them. I'm really hot to not only use them in real estate, but to do some other stuff. So for those of you who aren't following me on Instagram, let me suggest you do that. I've never been a huge Instagram guy. I did a home viewing marathon on there a few months back that people seem to like. So I'm going to try to do more. I'm going to try to take cool architectural pictures, just market pictures, that kind of stuff. Who knows what else? But I'm one thing I'm committed to doing in 2020 is carrying that camera around with me all the time, so I could take advantage of opportunities to get some cool shots. So if you want to try to find me on Instagram, you can just search for Rebel Broker. You can go to therebelbroker.com with all the various ways to follow me there. And you can also connect with the Rebel Underground there. So feel free to do that and stay in touch. All right, so let's jump in and look at this. This is from National Real Estate Investor. I'll include a link to this in the description for today's show. But this is kind of an interesting one because I think no matter who you are, whether you are someone looking for that very first investment property and you want to do that house hacking thing we talked about a few minutes ago, or you're a seasoned investor, you got 20 properties. So you're probably in a position, maybe you've got 20 single family residential properties, and you're thinking, you know what? Maybe I should look into this. There tends to be a robustness. There is a downside, right? There tends to be higher turnover in properties like this, and it depends. There are some duplexes, I think, that absolutely lend themselves to the benefits of having more return on investment because you got multiple units in the same property, but then also have some of the advantages of a single family residential because of the way they're put together. They don't feel like a multifamily. Once you get up to a quad, though, tends to start to feel a little bit more condo-y, a little bit more apartment-y. And that's A-okay, but it presents unique challenges. And my feeling is you're better off as a starting investor trying to focus on folks who are going to be renting from you for a long time, simply because in order for that to work for you to its maximum, one of the skills you're going to need to master is not only how to find a property and then successfully buy it, but then how to screen tenants. I will tell you that just like with real estate, you make your money when you buy the property, not when you sell it, right? You buy right, you get the price you want to get because you anticipate that market velocity in the future. So the real important work happens before you sign that transaction agreement, before you sign that contract to purchase that home, before you close escrow. All the real smart stuff that needs to happen before that. Just like before your tenant signs that lease and moves into your property, you need to have a robust screening process that's going to weed out the folks that are going to go in there, rip out all your copper wiring, remove all your toilets and sinks and refrigerators and everything else and run off with them, or just not pay you rent or whatever it is. You need to be prepared for that. And the most common thing I see investors doing that is dumb is not doing that. I've told the story before where this was a buyer that I had actually who was in a rental house, and that owner, the owner of that home, the landlord, delegated to the person who was going to leave their house the duty of finding the next tenant. I'm not sure why the person who was renting the house agreed to do that for the landlord, but she was fine with it. And so that's exactly what happened. She found someone else to move in, and no background checks were done. She even just emailed to my buyer the contract, the lease for this person to sign, had the person sign it. And so she never met at all the person who was going to rent this property. I'm also going to suggest that if you don't do this yourself, you need to go through the same process of evaluating property management firms. You are just as likely to find a really crappy property management firm as you are to find really crappy agents. In other words, that's what you'll find most of the time. So you need to realize that while theoretically they have your best interests at heart, They're a volume thing. They've got people just throwing things right through the system, and you need to be a part of that process. So if you are going to use a property management firm, you let them know you need to approve every step of the process. You need to see they're doing background investigations, and you get to review all tenant applicants prior to them being allowed to sign the lease agreement. Okay, anyway, so let's jump in. This is kind of an interesting article. I get the feeling that in a lot of ways they're referring to some larger multifamily units. They refer to this as high net worth investors and family offices mull next year's opportunities in commercial real estate. Well, we don't want to go there. That's not what I want to be talking about. I don't want to be talking about the 20 unit, the 5 unit, the 15 unit, whatever. I want to be focusing a little bit more on smaller units up to 4. I personally think that's the sweet spot, right? Again, particularly for house hacking. Now, can you go bigger and make money? Absolutely. But again, I think it introduces a set of skills that are fine for you to master. And I think it's a good thing for you to want to master them. But I say cut your teeth on something smaller first and start to learn those skills before you're trying to apply them to 10 units instead of 4. Okay. The first quote I highlighted here is take into account that millennials are drawn to home ownership less than prior generations, mostly resulting from an evolving workforce, and multifamily appears to be a sound investment where you can still find value and minimize risk. Okay, so interesting quote. This is from the CEO of some company in Texas, in Austin. And that's all fine, but in order for that statement to hold any credibility with me, you need to understand why. Why are millennials drawn to home ownership less than prior generations? Anybody want to venture a guess? I know I've got millennials listening to this show. It isn't because you don't want it, right? Maybe that's a spoiler alert, but it isn't because that's not what you want. It is absolutely what millennials I meet want. The millennials I meet don't do it because they can't do it. It has absolutely nothing to do with, I'm just not interested in owning a house. It's more, I wish I could own a house, but I can't. I don't have enough money. I have student loan that is crazy, and I have to deal with that first. And I get buyers who I have that conversation with frequently. I had one, and we've talked about this on the show before. One of the dumbest things you could ever do is, unless you for some reason really have to buy that house, but we talked about this before, where there's a loan option where you can roll your student loan into your home financing and have it end up having the loan amount being where you're underwater right at the get-go, right? So you're getting loaned 105%, 110% of the home's value. It's freaking nuts. And it converts that student loan into the kind of loan where they can take your stuff. And you don't want that. Student loans, they can't come take your stuff. Right? There's rules and regulations that really limit the flexibility of the loan holder, the lender, in terms of what they can do to you when you don't pay your student loan. So don't screw that up, is my suggestion, and roll that into a regular mortgage. All right, so going down here, they have some interesting communities. Interesting to me because we've talked about most of these communities. Somebody predicts, who the heck is this? I don't know, California Bureau, CBRE. I guess I should know that if I'm a well-informed dude, but I don't know. California Bureau of Real Estate. I want to say CBRE is real estate, right? Anyway, predicts the overall multifamily vacancy rate in the U.S. will rise by 20 basis points to 4.5% next year, still below the long-term average of 5.1%. Meanwhile, rent growth will dip to about 2.4%, slightly under the long-term average of 2.6%. So that's all okay. But again, when you compare that to single-family residential numbers, and of course mine is local, right? So who knows? This is national. My guess is that single-family residential performs better. However, you do tend to make more on a multifamily simply because a duplex does not cost twice as much as a single-family residential home, right? So that just makes sense. And the amount of money that you can charge in rent is not, and it depends on the unit. Some units are crappy, right? They feel super cramped. But if you have a unit, we have some great ones here in Morgan Hill that never go on the market. Some great duplexes that are every bit as rentable as a single family residential of the same square footage. They just don't feel like a duplex. They don't feel like a multifamily unit. Here's the downside though. Frequently, and this isn't 100% of the time because there's some great duplexes in West San Jose that don't fit this bill, you will frequently find duplexes right in the same neighborhood as big old apartment complexes. And we've got one of those streets here in Morgan Hill where on the right side, if you're driving south, are apartment buildings and on the left are duplexes. And that kind of sucks, right? You typically want, it's from an investor standpoint. It's not a huge downer. I mean, it does mean you're going to get less rent most likely. Usually parking is crazy right in front of apartment complexes, right? Because no one ever just has the one parking spot that they get as an apartment dweller. They also have to do the street parking. So I remember doing this crap when I rented an apartment when I was in college. And living there was nuts. You know, you get kids or people out on the curb with their car up on jacks trying to replace the tires or fix the starter, as I often found myself doing. So it's just a place where the vibe is going to get you slightly less rent, right? So keep those things in mind, right? It's all about location. Let's see. Next year's best multifamily opportunities, and here we get into the meaty bits, will be found in suburban markets. And I totally agree with that. I think the more suburban you can get with multifamily is good right now. If you can, and particularly because the amount to invest versus what you're likely to make is better in those markets. I think there's still tons of money to be made in urban, but my version of urban here in this marketplace equals spending a ton more. So in other words, let's say I do a duplex here in Morgan Hill, which would be considered suburban. If I get the exact same property in San Jose in a much more urban environment, I am going to pay more than twice, well, not more than twice, probably 70% more for that property up in the urban area, but I'm not going to get that much more for rent. So in terms of a income versus money invested standpoint, that suburban investment is going to represent a better deal. Now, like with everything else I tell you, do your due diligence, do the math. That conclusion, I've done the math. I've looked at stuff in areas I'd want to buy, right? There are some absolutely crappy areas in San Jose with duplexes, but I've done the math. So it does not pencil out. The monthly profit or the return on investment, that's what I primarily focus on. The 1 year return on investment for the capital invested in the property doesn't warrant the purchase unless I see some huge upside in terms of appreciation. And I do not see that. So do that math yourself to make sure that it's true in your markets. Now, so as I was about to get to, they're found in suburban markets and smaller metro areas, as well as in major metros like Atlanta, Austin. What's really bizarre is they list Austin, Texas, but they don't list anywhere else by state. So I'm not real sure what, are they just saying the state of Texas in general? Very poorly written. Anyway, Atlanta, Austin, Boston, and Phoenix. Now I've heard, this is the 5th or 6th time I've heard buzz about Boston. I don't know what to think about Boston. I've driven through Boston. I may have been to Boston once. I'm not 100% sure. May have. I'm a history guy, so that's exactly the kind of place I'd stop and look at some stuff. And Phoenix is on this list. So we've talked about Atlanta. We've talked about Austin. We've talked about Phoenix. We haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about Boston. So if someone out there has some insights into Boston, I'd love to hear it. But that feels like a market that could be ridiculously overpriced. It's in Massachusetts. And my understanding is the laws in Massachusetts are a little bit hinky when it comes to being a landlord. Maybe I'm wrong. But that brings us to another topic. How landlord friendly is your city, county, and state? Now, it's been obviously front and center for me as I've been wrestling with this stuff on my investment property in Hawaii, which has thrown the market into conniption fits. I had a conversation with an owner of a property in Hawaii in the same place where I have a place, and they freaked out, right? Because literally 6 months before this law passed, wow, man, it makes me want to weep because how would they have known, right? 6 to 8 months before this law passed that screwed over doing vacation rentals for folks on Oahu, these people bought and they proceeded to invest, which was a crazy amount of money given the square footage, $120,000 in remodeling so they could get top dollar as a vacation rental. They were literally only able to put it out for rental for 4 months before this law passed. And now they have to, and now because there are a dozen properties that were in the same boat, owners who are now trying to sell because of this law, property values for homes of that size have dropped from like 300,000. I mean, the last time I saw, the average price was like 110. So I mean, it killed the market. So if you can't afford to wait out this weirdness, that's bad news, right? Okay. And we've done actual like live market, and that's something I'm thinking about doing on a semi-regular basis, where we'll sit down and we'll do a deep dive on different cities. Probably doing those on YouTube, just because I'd like to show you the video of what I'm seeing on my desktop as we walk through. I'd love to get feedback from you on that. So do that. Head over to therebelbroker.com, click on Contact the Rebel, and let's talk about it. Let me know what your preferences are. Now, there's also this is the National Council of Real Estate Investment Fiduciaries. See, at least they gave me that one. Several regions stand out according to them. Now, this is they're referencing a slightly older report from 2018, but they are seeing continued growth in these areas. And they list off Las Vegas, Phoenix, Sacramento, which I think is interesting. I've been to Sacramento. I actually went to Sacramento State for a year to do some studying. As among the top 5 metro areas for outperformance in the multifamily category, I think you need to be super careful. I think Sacramento is one of those markets where you need to really have some market knowledge. You need to look around and see what's going on there. Because there are some just craptastic areas of Sacramento that you do not want to invest in. And they may seem attractive because those properties will probably be super cheap compared to some other areas. But their claim is that they expect that trend to continue in 2020. The last numbers I saw for Sacramento were actually pretty good. Listings were down, prices were up, which is great for sellers, obviously, not great for buyers. But I think it's still a market where you can find some interesting deals. Next, real estate data provider Yardi Matrix expects that Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Sacramento to wind up being among the top markets for the year-over-year rent growth for 2019. Other cities making the top tier included Seattle, Boston, Charlotte. We've talked about Charlotte before. We've talked about Seattle, Raleigh, Austin, and Nashville. So out of that, what are the areas I would focus on? Not a fan of Seattle. Weird crap is going on in Seattle. Boston, I don't know. I just get a feeling like that'd be a crappy place to be a landlord. Maybe I'm wrong. It's Massachusetts. Whenever I read a list of stupid laws that screw over landlords, it's either coming from California, Hawaii, Massachusetts, or New York. So there's that. I like things that would jump out at me in terms of my ranking. What of these listed areas would I go look at first? Charlotte, North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee. I continue to be a totally unsupported supporter of Tennessee. I like Chattanooga. I continue to look at that market because of the cool stuff they did with fiber that brought in a lot of high tech. Don't know what's going on with Nashville other than the whole music thing, but I would totally look there. In fact, of those, maybe that will be a deep dive. So stay tuned here. Maybe the next show, I'll go ahead and just make a show here that's a deep dive. I'll do video of the same show and post that to YouTube as well. So if you guys want to try to I'll try to make it as verbal as possible so you guys can follow me while you're driving along. But then if you feel like watching what I was doing, we can have that be that'd be a fun thing to do, right? I mean, as I mentioned, all my computer stuff blew up a couple of months ago, so I had to replace everything. I got new software. Theoretically, all this stuff will let me do that. So that'd be fun. It'd be a great... and also to see how much extra bandwidth it sucks up in terms of work to get that done. But anyway, so I hope that was valuable. If any of these are areas you've thought about, take a look at them. And remember, there is so much today. I still remember going into this business in the late 80s when the only way you could find out details about a property was either the newspaper in the sold section, right, the homes for sale section, or you could contact an agent and we'd have this big fat book of the homes currently listed for sale that came out. I don't even remember how often. Was it every week, 2 weeks, every month? I don't even remember. But anyway, and then we had like a thermal printer. If you were really high tech, you had the thermal printer and you'd dial in and you'd hear that thing, with the modem. Anyway, that was not a very good modem sound. I apologize. Anyway, I hope we've left you with some good Christmassy value today. Sorry, it wasn't actually themed, right? I didn't do a Christmas theme. I frequently will do themes. But anyway, hope I have left more value on the table than you've invested in time. I always appreciate feedback from my listeners. So please head over to therebelbroker.com and reach out. Or you can reach out to me all the other millions of ways. You can get me on, you can find my YouTube channel. You can hit me up on Instagram. You can tweet me. You can Facebook me. I've got both my real estate company and the podcast up on Facebook. So always anxious to hear back from folks, and I do try to stay in the loop on when folks are posting there. So feel free to use any of those venues that you'd like. I hope you guys have a fantastic Christmas, a happy new year, and I hope you've all got your goals, your retrospective of your goals, and your future look of your goals all squared away, because those are going to really set the pace for you in 2020. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.